Action-packed monsters can supercharge your D&D sessions, but can there be too much of a good thing? Matt Colville's action-oriented monsters are designed to balance out the action economy and add excitement to any game in which they're dropped into, but there can be a few pitfalls to the system that are worth addressing. The first of which I call the elsewhere problem. You see, homebrew, when it is not actually brewed at home, is in reality elsewhere brew. At your table, the various abilities that you add by creating your own action-oriented monsters can be useful and flavorful additions to your campaign. It's easy to recall something that you created for yourself, and so it doesn't seem terribly complex. Until, of course, you include something that somebody else made at your table, or somebody else gets a look at your homebrew and is scratching their head trying to figure out why you think that this is a simple inclusion when it has 3 different interconnected abilities, 2 different reactions, and a handful of bonus and regular options available to it every single round. At someone else's table, the intimacy of knowledge is lost and the complexity is increased in comparison to the depth that you're gaining. That doesn't make it a bad creation, but it's one reason that I don't typically include numbers and statistics in the YouTube shorts that I produce where I offer people ideas for homebrew creations. Because if you finish the design yourself, your player's experience will generally be better at the table. Added complexity does not always add depth, and it's important that we address that in our monster designs. Because honestly, there's a number of different factors that are just as important as the action economy to the creation of a good monster. Often at least as important as options is the speed of play at which a monster can be used. We complain about monsters lacking choices or options, but then we also complain about our combats taking too long. We blame players for this, but our monster design and the time that we take with our turns is equally to blame for this. It might feel like you're moving quickly with a monster, but the fact of the matter is that running a low-level simple monster is so much faster than running a creature with a full spell list that this has been a recent topic for monster design change at Wizards of the Coast, where they've attempted to simplify spell lists for creatures, not to limit the number of options that are available to the Dungeon Master for utilizing spells outside of combat, but to highlight which spells are going to actually make the largest difference and only including those on the stat block. The amount of cognitive load that a bunch of options adds and the amount of time that it takes to play is more than you think. And so simplifying monster design means adding speed to your encounters. This means that we need to identify any time that we're adding some kind of complexity to our monster, whether or not that added complexity adds enough depth to the gameplay that it is worth the additional time we're going to spend on it. And there's a tendency towards mechanics that actually work actively against us in that department, because most of the good monster designs that are out there do not include interconnected mechanics, no matter how much fun those can be at the table. Having a mechanic on your monster stat block that interacts with another action means, as the DM, you have to juggle one more ball. This added complexity adds more cognitive load, and of course, if you're using someone's elsewhere brew, slows things down even more. Having each piece of a monster's stat block individually usable instead of reliant on another piece of the stat block helps to add speed of play and make things smoother. That isn't to say that you couldn't or shouldn't occasionally homebrew your own interconnected mechanics, but if you're creating this for others or you're expecting to have multiple of a creature on the field, you want to limit this as much as possible. Something that action-oriented monsters were trying to address with villain actions is the idea that most combats in Dungeons & Dragons only really last from 1 to 3 rounds. Simply put, if you're creating a lot of action-oriented monsters, you're going to be creating a lot of villain actions that just don't see play. And at that point, they're just bloat on the page and clutter in your brain. Creating instead a phased villain action that takes you from phase 1 to phase 2 tends to minimalize this, as you can put that phased action in at halfway through the battle, whether that's halfway through the single round or halfway through the 6-round slog. I feel like when we focus too much on action-oriented monsters, we start to lose an appreciation for some of the excellent designs things that are already out there in simple stat blocks that are usable at our tables. One of my favorites is the lowly Ankeg, giving benefits and reasons to use both of their different attacks, and including reasons for players to engage in the grapple mechanic instead of just ignoring it. You also gain an attack benefit by finding a way to knock them prone and get access to their soft underbelly. They also include unconventional movement and senses that can make them interesting opponents in varied terrains, and turns them into a surprisingly effective ambusher and attacker. All of this is included in a streamlined stat block that includes not even a single bonus action or reaction. There are a number of gems like this throughout the monster manual, so much so that it really makes you wonder why they didn't just go the extra mile on every creature created. According to some of the developers, the monster manual re-release in 2025 might address this by giving each creature some unique flavor. We can certainly hope. You need to be careful to find the balance that works best at your table between creating complicated monster stat blocks that battle against the action economy and smooth encounter design that quickly bats the ball back into the player's court in order to keep tension and fun high at your table. One way that you can find that balance is to analyze, after that creation has been put into play, what kind of effect it had on your table. You can do that using my Dungeon Master Improvement After Action Report, which you can find up here. Thanks for watching, and happy adventuring.